Since the release of the last video, which was way too long ago, so much has happened in the flight sim world. Amazing planes have been released, and this has created a lot of opportunities to create really cool hardware for the plane that you'd love the most. Now, you might have noticed that we've done a little bit of work on the studio. Oh my god, the drawer is open. And it's far from done yet, but once it is, I will take you through it all. It's been out for quite a while, but it gives us a good opportunity to take a look how it is right now, after they've worked out the initial release box. Now, the first Concorde rolled off the production line in 1969. Now, it could fly at heights of 18 kilometers high at a speed of 2.04 Mach. That's 2 times the speed of sound. And that was and still is an insane speed for a passenger airplane. In short, this meant that it could fly from London to New York in less than 3 hours. If you would do that today, I mean, I'm not quite sure how long it takes. Let's see, London to New York, flight time. almost 8 hours, and it's going to be a direct flight. There were several factors into play why this plane was discontinued in 2003. We had a very tragic accident in the year 2000. I'm going to put a link of the Mentour pilot in the description down below that explains everything in depth, why this plane crashed and what happened and what the circumstances were, so go check it out. It's really informative. The accident in 2000 reduced the amount of passengers willing to take the plane, next to the problem that flying these planes was actually quite expensive. Getting a ticket was expensive. Like the average Joe, like myself, couldn't afford to fly with the Concorde. So that's why in 2003 it made its last flight from London to Filton, where it was built in 1979. Now that was enough chit chat about the history. Let's take a look how DC Designs and Just Flight recreated this historical iconic airplane into Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. Now, all I can say about the cockpit is that it's detailed and there are tons of switches that you can actually flick. Now, I'm a Flight Sim fan and perhaps you are too, but there might be a little bit of a difference. There are the folks that like to look at the flight dynamics and simulation and stuff, and I do like it, don't get me wrong, but I'm just not well versed enough to have an opinion about that. I'm more of the tinkerer. I love to work on these airplanes, to take apart, to create something physical for it, to flip switches, to open a window. But that's also the way I look at these planes. Can I do funny stuff with it? Can I manipulate the states of these switches? Can I turn a light on or off in my own room based on the light in an airplane? So that's perhaps a little bit of a different vision on how I look at these planes. Keep in mind when we walk through this plane. So first off, textures, not great. I do think they went a little bit overboard with the wear and tear. It's not bad, but because some things aren't as high fidelity as other things, it looks kind of tacky. It's like they went with a low poly count approach, perhaps to save on some performance hits on your PC, that if you have a lower end PC you can still run this properly. It doesn't feel like there is some depth to it, which makes it look kind of mediocre. So it's okay, it's not a bad plane, the interior isn't hideous, and if you take a look around, there is enough going on. Certain elements like this panel over here can be interacted with. I don't even know if I want to. It's just that if I see it right there, I want to do something with it. That is a little bit of a missed opportunity. I always like it. Certain planes have these breaker switches that actually change states. We can interact with the armrests. We can, right? You can always interact with the armrests. Am I just... That's a bummer. I can interact with the bridge trim, so that's actually quite important, but the system is inoperative. That's quite handy though. So perhaps this is a nice camouflage tactic. The button is inoperative. I hate the word, and I did like 10 takes to video this. You can't see that the button doesn't work if you can't see the button, unless you move over. But that's fine. There is a plethora of switches that we can flip. Here we go. All work. This works, this works. So there is enough to do in this plane, and there is enough to modify, but it does provide a huge amount of opportunities to create some cool looking interactive components, even just as a historical reference to the Concorde. Imagine having one of these panels up against your wall. You're being able to interact with it, flip a switch, and it changes something in game. It's a cool talking piece. Perhaps your spouse isn't as enthusiastic as you are. I know how that feels. But overall, I would want this. I would just want one of these panels on my wall and look cool. So yeah, in certain circles. We've got the overhead panel, and this is one part where they really lose me, are these big emergency shutdown handles. They look so square, they look so low effort that these are an eyesore compared to the rest. The rest is mediocre at best if we take a look at the cockpit textures, but these, it doesn't have to look realistic, it doesn't have to look perfect, but somewhat decent. That is something I'd like to see. So if there's gonna be an update in the future, please put it in, fix this, because it looks hideous. Now, you might have already seen what we went for, and it's a piece that really caught my eye, and that's this hydraulics panel that has only 2 3-position switches, so middle, right, yeah, up and top. We've got some lights that we can turn on. Let's turn on the engines. This is, yeah, I don't know how they, why. Look, let's try this again. So I've reloaded the plane, and this is the off state of these overhead lights. It almost feels like they went to this kids drawing school. Draw a green light. I mean, not my cup of tea. I do like these, how they are on. Are they on? They aren't on, right? Oh, hey, what are you doing there? Test lights. Now these are on as well. They are a little bit brighter, but at least this looks okay. Ah, there it goes. This is a nice touch. Seeing this go, seeing this move, it adds something. We should eventually see it. There we go. So exterior model looks decent. Nothing all too fancy, but it looks fine. Now, besides creating something for this plane, I've also tried to fly it, and I do love the plane. It comes in at 40 euros, or I believe on their own website at 35 euros. So it's a great entry point. This price point is where even people that aren't really into flight simming start to buy the plane, and that's a great thing. It enables you or gives you a really good starting point on getting into the hobby. It gives you a nice plane for 35 euros. Is it wonderful? No. Is it perhaps far from perfect? Yes, it is. Especially the look of the cabin. But it doesn't matter. It's 40 euros, and that's a lot. It's a lot of money for most people, and there's a lot of money for me as well. But I enjoyed it, and I think in comparison to other planes out there, it's actually a pretty fair price point. Now, are there other planes out there that are better? Yes, and so much great stuff has been released lately. We have the Executive from Just Flight, we have the BMDG 737, we've got the Boeing 247 for the more classical oriented people. We already have the BMDG DC-6 if you like more historical planes. But this fits in pretty well. That's probably the reason why you want this plane going super fast with a passenger plane. Usually you end up with a fighter jet if you want to go supersonic speeds, Mach 2.04. So this might fit that need that's currently not available in any other plane, I believe. If you want the most realistic experience out there, go look somewhere else, don't buy this one. But overall, I really love it. Now, besides loving the plane in game, and we're gonna be looking at, it has so much buttons and switches that you can flick that I decided to build a overhead panel for it. It's the servo control panel. You can find it in game as well. I do think that it came out better than the model did in game. Let's take a look on how we can create this. If you want a full in-depth guide on how you can create your own, go check out the website and my link, and we just do a brief overview over here in the video. So let's dive right in. The base of our project consists of a white layer. This gives us the white background we need for the text, so we can then print a blue layer on top to have this really nice looking effect where the text looks integrated into the front panel itself. Well, sometimes your work gets destroyed by your own incompetence, but not everything goes as planned, and that's the case here as well. I forgot to close the arm that applies pressure towards the filament, feeder, extruder, and that is why no blue came out, and then it started to dig itself into the print, even ruining that print bed a little bit more than it already was, leaving a dent in my print bed. Yeah, that happened. Then we masked the half off with some good masking tape. Make sure that it really stops paint from seeping through, so not the really cheap masking tape. I went with something like this green or blue painting tape. It will stop the paint flowing from one side to another more properly. Once it's painted off, a nice dose of green. It was a little bit of a pain to really carefully brush again around those letterings, and I did mess it up on a spot or two, but it did came out better than I expected, and the line is really, really clean in the middle. Lights, the red ones, I used a technique that I wouldn't really recommend, but it did work. I 3D printed the letterings on my 3D printing bed, and then I used super glue to glue on the white diffusing layer, but that did result in me ruining my print bread with super glue. It just seeped through, it got under, things got ugly. I had to retry like 10 to 20 times. The result is mediocre at best, but it's better than having no inlays in the middle. That now gets transferred onto the diffusing layer, but quality wise I wouldn't recommend it, and especially not to ruin your print bed. If you did print on blue paintless tape, this wouldn't be an issue that much. There are several ways to fit these LEDs to the front plate, but I went the lazy route, but no, I went the smart route and applied hot glue. Does it look stunning? No, but I don't care. This is going to be hidden behind the faceplate, so hot glue would do. Now you might wonder, why did you apply hot glue on the front end? Because that's not going to be hidden behind the faceplate. No, that's true. It's going to be hidden behind our LED covers. But the beauty of this is that the hot glue diffuses light slightly. I've learned that from one of my viewers in a very old video. It's a great trick. Cost efficient trick as well. It diffuses light. You don't have that hard LED shining against the diffusion layer. Yeah, it's a proper word. So go check it out if that works for you as well. First of all, this unit is currently powered by Arduino Mega from DF Robots. They've provided this to me for free to test it out. They didn't tell me to say anything positive about it, and they left me completely free and open to do whatever I want. But it's a great unit. It's just an Arduino Mega as you're used to. It has built-in Bluetooth, and we're going to be using this in a future video to do some wireless magic, to create a kind of Bluetooth control hub, and then make several Bluetooth modules that interact with the control hub to create a wireless flight sim experience as much as possible. So we're going to see if that's possible and what the results are and the performance, and if there's a difference between wired and what the pros and cons are, so stay tuned for that. Thank you very much DF Robot for this one. It's going to be used in quite some projects. Go check it out, and I'll put a link in the description down below if you want one for yourself as well. Now what do we need? We see these big units here. These are multi-position switches. It are I'm gonna unplug everything. Oh, we've already videoed this part, so we can just, YOLO. There we go. Everything can be removed, because I've used just normal header pins and the pond cables. So here we go. Clean this puppy up. And that leaves us with all the essentials, most essentials. So there we go. Yeah, fine. These and these. Okay. These are multi-position switches. Oh my god! And they are basically the switches right here. They are quite stiff, so keep that in mind. This one can actually turn farther than is necessary, because we only got left, top, right, but this one has 4 switches and 4 states. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've put 2 in each, so 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 LEDs, and those are 8 white ones and 8 green ones. That leaves us with a better graphic and illumination than the in-game model has. So on that field, it's a big miss for them, but a big win for us. Looks great. Wooden panel. There we go. Painted it in a grayish to match, how do you call it? Panel, plain panel, something. Yeah, fine. Okay, backside. Here we've got these two units were the multi-position switches. This is where we can set the switches itself. We've got resistors. For each LED, we've got a separate resistor. I believe I went with 470R, so that's 470 ohms resistors, and that dims the lights at a nice level to look at, so you don't get blinded and you want to just throw this thing out of the window. But you have a nice illuminated light that shines through these lampshade covers thingies, and it looks good. It doesn't look blinding, and it makes sure that we don't overpower the LEDs, because if you don't put a resistor in there, what will happen? It will burn out. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, what we've got here is an array of diodes. And now I haven't used these in a project very often, but what they basically do is they let the current flow in one direction. So if we, in this instance, we want the current to flow from left to right, but we never want it to flow from right to left. Why is it important? Well, there is a little switch here that we can see right here. Yeah, perfect. Which is our test switch. Now, turning this test switch on needs to power every LED. So basically, we want to provide power through the switch, and once it's on, we apply a current over here and it turns on all the LEDs. But because everything has to be connected over here, this would mean that the moment that we turn the switch off, but we send a digital signal to either one of the LEDs, all of them would turn on because everything is connected, or probably won't turn on because the output of your Arduino pins can't power that much LEDs from a single pin. It just doesn't provide enough current. So it will probably do nothing, but we want to avoid that. If we want to turn on a single LED, so let's say we want to turn on this LED, we don't want to turn on all the others. Now, if the signal runs one way, so here we go, and here and here and here, that's fine. The moment we interconnect everything, we get an issue, and that is where those diodes come in. Now, there are several ratings out there on how much current they can pass through, or what rating they are rated. Overall, get the ones that are best suited for you. I believe I went with 5 volts respectively, so they can let 5 volts pass, or they are rated for that. Perhaps they can do more, but that's not what they meant for. Now, ground is very important. We do need a ground line, and in this instance, we can hook up everything to the same ground line. So don't be bothered by wiring every component up to a separate pin on your board and get a whole clumsy mess. Just make sure that everything interconnects with each other. So we got our LED here. If we follow the line, we go to the next LED. If we follow the line, we go to the next LED. If we follow the line, we go to the next LED. And now we got a nice little construction going on. Ground to the lowest pin, to the middle pin, and then we have a cable running to the left pin. Now we keep following the cable, and does it stop here? Ah, yeah. Apparently, we had a T junction right here, so we go up here, in here, over here, sorry, down there, and then we move to this LED, and this LED, and this LED. So that way, everything is connected to the same ground network, and here at each of these resistors is where we got pins for our LEDs individually. So what does that mean? If we plug in a cable right here, we can control this LED by turning this signal high or low if we want to turn it off. Same goes for here. Voila. this one, etc. And we can do that for all LEDs. Now, there is something special about the Concorde and the way these lights turn on, and that's these two turn on, these two turn on, these two turn on, these two turn on, and these turn on. Both the other two in here, they turn on two each time. They all turn on two at a time. So we don't want to have to hook up, that gives us 16, we said, right? Yeah, 16. We don't want to hook up 16 wires for 16 LEDs. In this instance, it will suffice by doing 8, because everything turns on in pairs. So what you can't see, because I bloody glued this. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna... so much blood and sweat and tears and effort went into this. I can't get it off. I'm weak. These two are connected together. These two are connected together. These two are connected together, and these two are connected together. So that way we can provide a current to this pin, so this resistor, and it will power this resistor and this resistor, but it will go to each LED individually. So we do have two separate lines going out, but we only have one going in. And that's fine. The pins on your Arduino can power this. Ideally, if you have an external power source, you might have a different setup, but this works fine for this rudimentary product or board. And that leaves us with our nice contraption. Concorde, hydraulics panel, servo controls, whatever this is. I'll put a link to all the materials used in the description down below, as well as a link to the 3D files. I used to upload them to Thingiverse, but I'm switching everything over to printables.com. It's just that the website is so much better, so go check it out on printables.com. I'll put a link in the description, and this is where you'll also find all the files I've released in the past few years, I believe. Year? Not quite sure. Quite some time. Longer than a year. I know that for a fact. It's not been 2 years. I believe. I hope. Perhaps I'm wrong. We're gonna find out. But go check it out. So go out there, have fun, create your amazing projects, share them with me on Discord, send them by email, hit me up on GitHub, whatever you want to. If you want to help out programming the connector, go check it out as well. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.